my Series 2 Lambretta. It is the best riding Lambretta that I've owned. Now, I've had a Jet 200 that I've been riding since the 90s, I guess, and I finally sold that a few years back. And the scooter I've been riding the most before this Series 2 is my LI 150 Special Savetta. It's pretty fast. Stuff that I wanted to cover on this video. Tips on, like, when I restored this scooter, I took it all apart, hell putting it back together, so I'm going to give some tips on when you start putting it back together. There's a few things you want to do in order so you don't have drama trying to reach the nuts and bolts. So I'm going to cover that part. A lot of people buy a wiring harness, but I like to wire them up myself. And I know you're probably saying, like, no, I don't want to wire the scooter up myself. But trust me, I'm going to give some tips on how to wire it up, and it's easier than you think. With a Series 2 Lambretta, you know, maybe it's a little over-engineered. There's a couple things that you could just leave off the bike. A few mods that you can do to the motor to make the motor run better and last longer. Do's and don'ts for, like, riding a 1950s bikes. But anyway, we're going to get into it. These are my favorite scooters to ride, and I have some Vespas, but I like my Lambrettas. Let's get started. This doesn't really have anything to do with the performance of the scooter. It's easy to get to those bolts to bolt it down. I mean, when you have everything in there, that's the hardest thing to get on, and adjusting the seat, the seat lock, trying to get all that right. If you have a rack, definitely put that on, get that out of the way. Then the next step is to put on the tail light, license plate. Once you got that bolted on, then put that mud guard on. Go by these steps and it just makes everything easier. Put the glove box in, then after the glove box, you put the gas tank in. That's easy. And I find if you do this order, it just makes everything easier to work. Because one time I got rushy and I wanted to put the motor in right away, and then I put the glove box in, then I tried to put that seat on, and no room to work. It took forever. So you just kind of want to do it in a certain order. It just makes the workflow easier. If you have a glove box, definitely attach that glove box to your leg shield before you even put it on the scooter. Got a work manual book that's really good in showing you where to place the cable. I put extra loops of maybe zip ties or tape to make sure all those cables are laying along the frame. I'm riding along and it's just like so noisy. I'm trying to, like, what is that noise? That's the noise of the cables rattling in that area because they're not tied down. I'm putting as much tie down points along that frame, so when I'm riding I don't hear those cables. It sounds really solid if you make sure all those cables are just like on the frame and real tight. You just want that to be tight so you don't hear it making noise. This is my wiring section. This picture looks like absolute chaos, and I understand why most of you guys don't even want to touch wiring up a scooter. Change your way of thinking about how you're going to wire the scooter up, and to make wiring a lot easier. And then also this could make it easier for, like, say if you have that one bulb or one light that won't work, everything else is working, but you just want that one to work. So why buy a whole new wiring harness when you can just fix that? But anyway, let's get started. The best way for me to wire up a scooter is to wire it up using a battery charger. What we're going to do is we're going to replace the motor with a battery, and that battery charger is simulating your motor running. First thing I want to do is get a running light. I don't care about the brakes lights, I don't care about the horns, I don't care about anything else. I just want to get the running light. The positive on the battery is simulating the wires coming out of the motor. It's very simple. I just repeated this process over and over. And this illustration is the exact same thing. You have a brake light switch. Power goes to the switch, close the circuit on the switch, power hits the bulb, done. I got a running light and a brake light. Now this is where you would say like, oh my god, this is complicated. There's a switch up there. We have the power wire coming up to the headset. It's basically going to a switch, and that switch is saying send power to the high beam or power to the low beam. If you were trying to do this all at once, you'd have all those wires and be confusing, but if you just one by one run your wires, it looks like chaos, but what we're doing is trying to get everything to work. And once you get everything work, you can make it look nice and neat later. Pressing the kill switch, basically grounding out the spark. I'm using a bulb to tell me if I'm grounding the motor out. Some Lambrettas don't have a regulator, and some Vespas don't have regulators. Engine goes up to a certain RPM, that's all it's going to put out. With Lambrettas are almost like dirt bikes. If you put a pipe on there or you get a tailwind behind, that bike will put out more than 6 volts, more than 12 volts every time. So what this box does is a regulator, but it's a simple regulator that I can understand. You have one wire ground to the bike, and then the other wire would just basically, when you have your power coming out of your motor going to your bulb, you're just going to put that wire in that system. So all that wire is doing is just eating out any extra juice. That box is keeping your motor from overcharging the system. Okay, you saw the chaos at first. Now look at, when I wired up the whole bike, that's all my wiring coming out right there. See some wire harness just like a ton of wires. I'm like, why is there so many wires there? You see how many wires are right there coming out of there? That's why I like wiring up the scooter myself, because it's less complicated. In the headset on these old Series 2, they have like a little block to where you plug your wires in. The best way to do it is run your wire straight from your switch to your bulb. You want to do it like me, you just want to use that to hold your wires in place, and don't bother plugging in wires to that brick thing. And there you have it. You know, I hope I kind of explain this to where it's not so complicated, but to me it's simple to run my own wiring. I know what's going on. It's just easier to deal with when things start going wrong, like a light goes out or something like that. It's just easy. There's some parts of the Lambretta was over-engineered, and then there's some things on the Lambretta I was like, why do they have this part on here? Well, I figured out that splash guard, to me it's unnecessary, but now I really thought about it. Can keep mud and dirt from building up around the pipe and clogging up the cylinder cover. That's what that's for. Now, these are modern times, and most of us are riding our Lambrettas on the street. Take that thing off. All 3 of my Lambrettas, I had that part break off. It hangs down, the bike is vibrating so, and that thing is under the bike, it's just waving like this. It'll cause a stress crack and cause those to break off. All 3 of my Lambrettas, either one time it broke completely off, and other times you hear a rattle on there and you find that one side of it has broken off. So I'm basically, unless you can get that thing welded, like say if you get you buy aftermarket one, it's going to happen. The same thing's going to happen to it. It's just a poor thought out design the way they have it installed. So I would take it off the bike. Don't even bother putting it on there, because if you like me, you ride a lot, it's going to break off. Unless you're on a farm going through mud fields and stuff, there's no point in having that on the bike. Getting that Series 2 motor ready to make the distance, or making that Series 2 motor reliable. There's certain things that when you build one of these motors, some stuff you need to go ahead and change. The scooter is a 62 model, but the motor and frame is a 59. And my guess is basically sometimes when they were putting the scooters together, maybe they had all the frames and motors built, and then when the new models were coming out, they started putting like the more modern frame on this scooter. So yes, it's a 59, and we'll get to that in a minute, because there's some parts of the motor you'll understand when I say it's a 59 motor. Well, first of all, this motor was in horrible condition, and I had no plans of restoring it, except for it had one thing that I wanted really bad, the 150 gears. And if you guys know about 125 gears, you know 150 gears. 150 gears are so much better, but they were so pitted. I was kind of hesitant on maybe using these, but I'm like, oh, forget it. I'm gonna clean it up and ride it. If they blow up on me, that's one thing. So far, I put more than 100 miles on the bike, and those gears are so good. It's called a crown wheel. I guess on Vespas they would call it a clutch basket. That clutch basket has an extra little spring in it. When you're going into gears, it makes everything not lock up. The wear and the tear on the motor a lot better, I feel. Cannot use it. Say, I'm using on a 150, so I'm just sliding in there. But the minute you kick that motor up to over 150 cc's, put a pipe on it, anything, you cannot use that part. You need to get a more modern clutch bell, the one that doesn't have the spring in there, because adding power to that part will blow it up. So I was talking about the 1959 motor and the 1960 motor. Here is the difference. One of the jugs is taller than the other, so the jugs are completely different between the 59 and the 60, and you can see how the pistons are different too. Let's see if you can see that. See how tall that is? There we go. See, like the piston for the 59 is a smaller size piston. Now I'm thinking like, man, I want that small piston. I'm thinking like it's gonna go up and down the jug faster. It's gonna make the scooter faster. Well, that piston, the way it's set up, it is so loud. What it does is, since it's a shorter piston, what it does, it rocks back and forth in the jug and causes a pinging sound. So when it goes up to the top, when the piston goes up to the top of the head and gets under compression and comes back, the crank kind of goes up and down, and that piston rocks in the jug and go ping. It makes a pinging. That pinging sound is the piston rocking up, the back of the piston rocking up and down, making that pinging noise. And with this old piston, it just makes so much noise. Basically, upgrade your piston and cylinder. If you have that small size 1950s cylinder and piston, just go ahead and get rid of it, because it's loud and no telling how long it's gonna last. Everybody already knows this, and you should know this too, but if you don't, change that top chain guide. Like the top chain guide for all, like, you can kind of get away with it on a 125, but even if you open that motor up to do any kind of work on it, change the top chain guide. I've had those break off on me 4 times running fast. Motor completely locks up. You know, I got really good on locking my motor up back in the day because I was putting the wrong oil in there, but it would lock up on you. You have to pull that clutch in fast, but that will lock your motor up because that top chain piece it's not made that well. So go ahead and replace that with an aftermarket one. And something else I ran into with the Series 2 motor, you will see the Series 1 and the Series 1 and Series 2 has this really short kickstart. It has a really short kickstart, but what I'm finding is, if you look at the way the cases are made, they're made fragile around that point, because what they were having was people kickstarting with that short kickstart really close. Like, it's really close to the pivot point, and it was causing to get stretch cracks around the cases back then. I got lucky and found a kickstart that was longer, that stuck out wide enough to not be under the floorboard of the Series 2, because the floorboard of the Series 2 is really wide. So if you can find a kickstart lever that's like long like that and not under the floorboard, get it. I actually like the old school state of play. You got 3 wires coming out of there. One's a ground and just 1 wire for all electrics. I love that. You cannot use this part. If you look at it at the angle, this part will separate. So you're riding along and you did your motor right, and all of a sudden you hear your cooling shroud making noise. The flywheel metal part fan is separating off the magnet. They redesigned it so more of the fan area is covering most of the magnets, so you don't have that problem anymore. And then also on some of them, they just made it one piece, and some Indian ones have screws to make sure that doesn't happen. So I want you to get rid of the kickstart lever, and that's making it not look stock, or it's not looking like, you know, all original. But one big change to make is do not use that original muffler. I tried using it, and I think I even bought one, as it rattles so much that it will literally rattle apart. I've had two of those that come completely apart. A Series 3 muffler is what you're going to want. You're not going to want that original one. Yes, it looks great if you're at a scooter rally, or you're trying to get best of show and custom building your bike. Yeah, you want to have that original part. But if you're like me, I'm like bar hopping all the time. Every time I ride my scooter, I'm riding maybe 30 or 40 miles every time I ride it I ride from my neighborhood into Dallas. Round trip is like over